So this is how you make chicken bottom. You get a whole chicken from the store, fresh preferably. Otherwise, get one out of the freezer and let it thaw out. Put it in cold water in a big pot. And then after you clean the chicken and wash it off, you put it in the pot and cut it on and let it boil until it boils down. And basically you want to get it to where the chicken is almost falling apart. And once it gets to that stage, you'll pull the chicken out, as you'll see we'll do in a little bit. And then I'll pick the chicken, and we'll see that in a minute. So that'll be the next step. Okay, well, come over here, I guess. We've taken the chicken out of the pot because the chicken is done. You'll see it's more or less falling apart. I put it in a colander inside of a bowl or a pot or a pan or whatever, and so that it drains out and cools off. So we're going to let that cool off while we are cooling that off so we can pick it apart, because we're going to take the skin off and the bones out. And I'll put them back into the pot for the time being. We'll let that cool. We also have the vegetables. In ours, we put carrots. These are fresh from the garden. A nice onion and some garlic. And to demonstrate garlic, we take a piece of garlic from I think that's like 4 or 5 cloves. Take it and we smash it. We'll hit it flat with the blade of the knife, which will squish the garlic. And then the skin will come off. That's a little teeny piece. The skin will come off and the garlic will stay behind. And then we'll mince that up and cut this up and cut that up. And then we'll come back to the chicken and put the rest of it together.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the meantime, we cut up the vegetables, just a rough chop on the onions and the carrots, and then the garlic. I started pulling apart the chicken. We pull the skin off. I throw it back in the pot so that it gets some more of the flavor into the broth. And then, the meat I'll pull off, set aside. Ow, that's hot. Be careful, it's hot. Pull off the little piece of the fat and just put the chicken over here. And the other junk goes into the pot, which we'll strain out later. And I'll do this for a while, and then we'll see where we are from there. Okay, we picked the chicken. All the parts went back into here that we didn't keep. So now I've got to strain that. So we'll pour that back into the colander, which is on top of that other pot. And get the fat out of there. Let that drain. While that's draining, put the pot back on the stove, crank it up to high. Alright, so we got the pot on high. Put some olive oil in the bottom of the pan, enough to kind of more or less coat the bottom. And then we take the veggies and we go ahead and cook those down some.
Okay, go ahead.
Alright, so you'll cook these until the onions turn translucent. So we're just getting started on that. While that's cooking, you have to stir that regularly. I will typically move the broth. For cooking rice, you need 2 cups of liquid to 1 cup of rice. This is a 4-cup measurement. I guess you don't have to do this whole sieve thing that I'm pouring it through. So that catches some of the other stuff. I'll let that sit, come back over here and stir. And Alright, so the onions are cooked down, everything's sort of cooked, and you know, it's cooked down to looking like that. If you look over here, you'll see we've got 2 cups of rice and 4 cups of broth that we made. The stuff that you see on the top is actually fat, and a lot of times I'll stand here and I'll scoop this off. Like most of the time I do this, so it's not so fatty. This spoon is helpful, but because of its design, but any of them will work.
It's called a ladle.
It is a ladle. So that gets a lot of the fat out of it. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and add, what you didn't see when I was away is I went ahead and put some salt, about a tablespoon, which is...
Don't do it in your hand. Your hand's bigger than hers.
Doesn't matter. It's just a pile about that big. Or you can get a tablespoon measure. I already put that in there. And some pepper, and I cooked it with the onions. We'll go ahead and add the rice in. Doesn't really matter which order you do it in at this point. I like to put the rice in and stir it up, and it gets kind of that olive oil into it, and the salt and the pepper. But you have to season rice before you cook it, or while you cook it, I guess, because it just doesn't work as well afterwards. So we've got the rice in, we've got all the vegetables cooking, we've got the broth to go in. I cut the temperature down a little bit. You'll bring that to a boil. Let it boil for a little bit. You know, a minute maybe. Just bring it to a boil, and then once it comes to a boil, you put the top on it. Cut it down to, on our stove, like 3, which is a low temperature, and put the lid on it and let it cook for about 30 minutes, and you're done. Ready? Alright, so the broth has come to a boil. You want to stir it as, you know, a couple times here and there as it does, so the rice doesn't stick to the bottom and start burning. So it's come to a boil. When we add the chicken in, you actually can add this in at any point, it doesn't really matter. But I like to do it now. The bigger pieces you can break up. Add that in. Stir it up. You don't have to use all the chicken either, but we will tonight. It looks like. So, put the lid on, cut the temperature down low, like a 3 or 4, and in 30 minutes it'll be done. So chicken broth is really pretty easy. You use a chicken, whole chicken in broth to make a good broth, or in water, and you cook it down to make a good broth. You season the broth with salt, about a tablespoon, maybe a little bit more. You cut up your vegetables, put it in, saute those for a little bit, put the broth and chicken back in, and enjoy. Chicken parm.